combing.
Oh, you're fine.
I think we should start now.
Does anyone want my comb?
It would go in and not come out.
Okay, it's here if you want it.
I just brushed my hair.
Yeah.
Already. Hi, we're Big Sisters in STEM. My name is Jasmine.
My name is Alice.
And today we're joined by two amazing guests. We've got Elle and Claire. And I don't even know where to start today. I think there's a few things that we want to get to.
There's a few things we need to address, I feel.
Address?
Yes.
Okay.
Where are we?
We're at a new studio.
We are.
This is our first episode in a new studio. This is also our first episode with Alice as our co-host. So, warm welcome.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
Do you want me to lie?
No.
I feel nervous.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I feel nervous
I
too.
know. Sorry, it's the imposter syndrome coming in.
I actually feel less nervous now that you're here too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you guys feel nervous or are you just happy to be here?
I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah?
I'm sure I'll fall into it, but
Yeah.
We're all nervous. Do we need a team hug? 1, 2, 3. Team.
So, yeah, we've got some changes this time. They're all very exciting. But we've also got two guests with us who we've never had on the podcast before. And it's been really interesting getting to know both of you. And there's a few things that I think you may find are commonalities. I don't know what ground you've covered already. I know you were just having coffee together.
yeah, in about 10 minutes we covered a fair
lot.
amount of ground actually.
Oh, I love that.
Life stories shared.
Best friends already.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that came up when we've been speaking with you, I don't know if you were just talking about it upstairs, was this idea that what you might imagine your life to be or your journey to be isn't always exactly what then happens. And that's completely okay. That life isn't a straight line and it can take many different directions. And as both of you are now doing a PhD, after having been in industry, I feel like you may have that in common.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came back from industry after a few years. So I graduated, got my master's degree, and then started working in Cambridge at a green energy startup, which,
And your degree at undergrad was electrical engineering?
electronic engineering, yeah, that's right. It was, it was fun. Cambridge is an interesting place. The whole sort of tech bubble there is there's a lot to be said for it, let's put it that way. So I did that for about a year and then got offered another job designing sort of life-saving equipment, rescue beacons. So I did that for 3 years.
When you say life-saving equipment, what kind of things do you mean?
So sort of like a device that goes on your life jacket, and then if you fall overboard and you're on a boat, then it will transmit a load of signals. So one will go to a satellite, and the satellite will send that to sort of search and rescue. Another signal to the nearby boats in the area, and a homing signal. So if someone is looking for you, it will get sort of louder or whatever that might be as it gets closer. So yeah,
that is so interesting. And how did you get into that? When you were studying, did you know that you were into that kind of thing, or did it something that came in industry?
Yeah, so I had a lecturer who I really respected, guy at University of York, and it was all sort of the radio electronic stuff. He was a little bit old guard, I would say. He really he was definitely someone at the university who all the other exams would be, you could figure out roughly what was going to go on the exams, you could learn the past papers quite nicely, and he would come up with incredibly creative questions every year.
Just throw a curveball.
Yeah, everyone hated
Creative
it.
is a lovely word for that.
Very nice word for that.
Yeah, he came up with like very creative questions every year, and you really had to actually like understand the subject, and that felt like a challenge to me. So I got talking to him quite a lot and wound up doing my thesis with him. And as you get into sort of radio work, like radio equipment work, it can filter into a few different paths, and sort of rescue beacons actually wind up being quite a natural offshoot from that. So it's hard to know exactly where you're going to wind up, but I think towards my last couple of years, my industry work was I knew where the industry work that I was going to be taking would go.
Being interrupted by my stomach rumbling. I'm sorry.
Jasmine's stomach needs a microphone.
Got that.
Wait, so how did you get into your PhD then from industry?
Yeah, so well, I transitioned in industry. I'm a trans woman, and I sort of, when I started that job designing rescue beacons, I basically came out around that sort of time. And then industry, my experiences in industry, I would say, were quite interesting. In that I don't know, I don't think I experienced much in the way of transphobia, but I definitely noticed the more I looked like I wanted to look, and the more I sort of, the more I was perceived as a woman in industry, the less pleasant it got. Certain things like being talked over all the time, being the first one to be blamed for absolutely everything, like sort of guilty until proven innocent for whatever. So I went into that into
That must have been such a weird experience.
Yeah, because you hear about it. You hear women in engineering talking about it, and I think pre-transition I was always aware that it was like that. I'd watched it happen, but then to sort of experience, especially as it was like a sliding scale that sort of went up and up and up. That was a very bizarre place to be. So it got to the end of that, and I sort of didn't want to stay. And I was looking around, and there was a professor that I liked, who I'd read a bunch of papers from, and I sent her a message one evening, and did not think I was going to get a response from that whatsoever. And then she pulled me into an interview a couple of days later. So,
oh my god! Wow, just something like that, just sending that message had such a huge effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's something so small, and you just think, God, I don't even know if I'm going to get a response from that. And then it turns everything around. I love that.
But I think that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
Like if you talk to a lot of people, sometimes it's that one conversation that you have with someone that then is like, oh yeah, I could totally do that. And I think this is where we're quite similar in terms of that person and kind of wanting that change and looking to do something different. And I also think while we're really different, themes of what we're doing for our PhD, and they're quite different, but in a lot of ways really similar, because it's about having something that is actually we're kind of really interested in, and something that we might not have done had we gone from undergrad, masters straight into PhD.
Yeah.
And I think for me certainly that was a kind of different path, and I think ending up in kind of construction and buildings, it's kind of really interesting about how you then kind of, I want to be able to influence things differently. And I think a PhD is a really nice way of being able to really delve deeply into something that actually you really can be really quite passionate about.
Get specific.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, I find, like that particular thing of, I remember being in industry designing products, and you get pulled from thing to thing to thing, and you'll notice something, you'll think, I really wish I could learn more about why that is the way it is. And then you'd immediately be dragged out to do something else, because it's usually fast paced and usually doing something.
Understanding it rather than accepting it type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Claire, you covered a lot of ground then when you were talking about your experience.
Sum it up into one sentence. That was impressive.
And I know you enjoyed site work.
Yes.
And you enjoyed that construction side. So
Yeah.
what made you kind of find that area that you wanted to then understand more deeply and have more of an impact in?
So I'm really interested in social housing and climate change. That's kind of where my two bits kind of meet. And being on construction sites and seeing homes built, and your kind of building physics head goes, why are they building that? It's going to be awful. Like energy demand and like future proofing. So we know it's going to be warmer and wetter. Why are we building these things that are just going to not be helpful for that person who's going to be in that home? So for me, that's why it kind of pulled me in to be like, okay, well, in terms of climate resilience for social housing, that's kind of, let's try and unpack that a bit more so that we can ultimately, and this is my kind of aim, is to hopefully influence UK policy on that so that we actually build better.
Yeah.
Because that's what we
Why?
need to be
Why
doing.
is that? Is it cost? Is it a money thing?
Some of my research I've been doing around interviewing people.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that across the board of academics, public sector, construction, energy, kind of regulatory backgrounds, it's all about the will of making changes. So the kind of will of people to say, right, we need to improve building regulations and outside influences. And I think we were talking earlier, weren't we, about outside influence of things and decisions and how that can actually derail things in a lot of ways.
Are there any countries you think do what you're talking about here particularly well?
That's a really good question.
That is
a good question.
Boom.
What do you think about that?
I think there are bits of building policy in particular that I think are more kind of progressive towards decarbonising, for example.
Right.
There are different areas where actually social housing has much more of a importance in the kind of the governance element to it. So there are, I'm talking a lot about kind of making social housing infrastructure, because if like a major road, you had housing as an infrastructure piece, it would get much more prominence, and therefore it would kind of, we would be building more. Whereas at the moment it's kind of a bit of a struggle in terms of doing that, in terms of getting what we need to be building. But there are certainly kind of areas where Denmark and Finland, in terms of adoption of heat pumps,
always Scandinavia.
But then there are, if you look across Europe, there are lots of interesting policies that push in certain areas. I don't think there's one I would point to that's kind of, yes, that's where we need to get to, because as soon as you start thinking about climate's different.
Yeah.
Climate is changing, so you can't really have this, I guess, formal, solidified, yes, that's exactly what we need to do, because we're still learning every day about what that change means.
So is policy one of the things that you're talking about a lot in the Northwest Steering Group, which you co-chair?
We do quite a lot, actually. So IEMA is soon to be rebranded. So it currently is the Institute...
Yeah, do you want to tell us about IEMA?
It's the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and it's a professional body for people who kind of sit under that umbrella. So I did my associate membership when I was at Manchester Airport, because a lot of sustainability careers, will say, have you got this professional membership? In a similar way.
Which is really interesting to know.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, that's general knowledge to people that want to go into sustainability.
There are lots of different avenues, and there are lots of kind of very bespoke areas as well. So if you talk to someone, say, in life sciences, they might talk about like SciWEM, which is water and environment. Sure. Or if you talk to someone who's more waste-based, they would talk about one of the kind of waste professional bodies.
It's like a step on your specialism journey. Yeah,
exactly. What I do really like is the fact that there is now a chartered environmentalist. So if people kind of are in accountancy, hi, I'm a chartered accountant. It's that, it's that kind of parallel, which I think is really, really good. So I did that about 9-10 years ago, kind of getting my chartered status, because there aren't a lot of people who have it, which I think is really good. But IEMA is really kind of trying to just talk about interesting topics. We've been doing a lot of careers sessions about kind of career paths in themselves, and we ran one on campus last year, and was really positive, because it had I make sure that we have diversity of the panels, because I know that when I went to career sessions, it was never a very diverse panel of people that that came to speak. And whilst their job sounded lovely, I couldn't resonate with that person. And I think that's really important. So I do always try and kind of do those. And I think it's important for people to see opportunities for doing things, and learning about different things. So we ran an event about beaver reintroductions in Cheshire. We've done
What introduction?
beavers, as in the mammal.
Like beavers.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I thought you meant the club. You know, there's
Oh,
scouts,
like scouts.
the squirrels and beavers.
no. The
I'm
mammal.
with you. I'm back.
Because ecologically they're amazing.
Yeah.
So we've been doing kind of lots of different events like that, and I think it's about giving people an opportunity to see what's out there.
It's that visibility, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I really enjoy kind of doing those kind of things, because you get to kind of learn all sorts of different things. And whilst I am based kind of in engineering, actually my kind of STEM world is much bigger than that, because
broader.
Exactly, because it does kind of touch on so many different elements.
It's interesting you touch on diversity in engineering. I went to an event at the university was hosting the other day about EDI in engineering and getting into industry if you're part of a minority group. And the room was entirely full. There were people standing at the back, because there's so many people who have these barriers in industry, because it's still so inaccessible. Even things like one of the guest speakers was like, hadn't even been told about where the prayer rooms were at the place that she started working at for like 6 months, or even like the pronunciation of people's names were still being wrong. And it was really interesting. It was really eye-opening.
Those things are really important events, right? And even like this podcast as a platform, talking about those issues is important, and it can be a bit dispiriting sometimes, because you hear about the barriers and it can kind of put you off and scare people.
Yeah.
But the fact that more and more people are talking about the barriers is really important. And I think, to me, if you were to hear that and maybe think, oh, maybe that's not what I should go into, then am I going to feel left out, or like my voice doesn't matter? It's the opposite, isn't
completely.
it?
Because you can only solve a problem by talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And kind of addressing it.
And the community's growing,
and
more
the community,
people are doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting because one of the speakers also mentioned that being a female, being a woman in STEM or engineering specifically, found that whenever they were talking about anything technical, like she wasn't part of the conversation, and like they mistook her for a receptionist.
Yeah, it's interesting to see again.
Sorry, that last line. What? That's so bad.
I know.
That's comically bad. That's like a sketch on TV.
I've seen it with tea making. That the woman in the room is
really?
the tea maker. Yeah.
Oh God.
This is exactly the kind of thing you were talking about.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, I don't know, I think there are certain men in industry. I think there's an old guard to a lot of how industry is run. I think it really depends on the culture of where you go. The people who do run these things and have the capital to run these things come from a very certain type of background most of the time. So I think, changing things on the ground, we can go quite far with that, but it's really the sort of leadership and the upper management that I think that's where the culture is a lot harder to change. I found a lot of my management in industry, as much as it was very, again, the being talked over thing, it's very hard to call that stuff out as well, I found, because like, bless them, I liked the people I worked with, right? I really did. Like, I got along with them really well. They didn't notice what they were doing.
That's a very good point. I think sometimes when you just talk openly about this stuff, I think if you're in an environment where you're talking to people who fit the profile of someone you're complaining about in that sense, they can feel offended. But really, it's not about like demonizing anyone. It's just making them step back and notice the biases they're kind of acting on all the time.
The unconscious ones.
Yeah.
The like learned behaviours.
Yeah, and I've done that, and I felt uncomfortable with colleagues that I really like and respect. But in meetings, I'll go in and I'll lead with something, and then at the end of the meeting, someone will wrap it up and be like, so just so we're clear, this is what I think we should do, and it's what I said. And I have to say, you mean what I said at the beginning of the meeting. And it makes me feel bossy, and that's a word that I hate being used. And I think especially as a very like feminine presenting person, I feel like that is something that you get rather than like strong or in control. Like you feel like you're acting out of sorts, out of what you should do.
Like
But
you
you have to do it.
apologise.
I have two voices almost on my shoulder. I have the
Yeah.
one which is kind of cowering away and thinking, no, just don't say anything. Like it's gonna make people look at you. It's gonna make you feel like you're stepping out of line. And then the other one which is like, no, you have to do that. Point it out every time. And it is a bit of a journey you have to go on with yourself, like how ready you are, and especially when you first go into industry. Especially if you go straight from undergrad or masters and you're 20, 21, 22, you're probably not going to feel empowered to do that.
Yeah, it's like that, like you said, it's higher ups and it's more senior kind of people in industry. And it's like, why is the pressure on the people being affected by these issues to educate those people? Shouldn't there be a conversation about those people educating themselves?
I think one of the things there is that a lot of these people, right, so in my experience, these people have all been highly educated, generally, pretty intelligent people who have a bit of a blind spot on their own self-awareness. The problem is when someone is very intelligent and someone is clearly very capable, getting them to accept that they have a flaw when the ego is involved, if you're being told like how clever you are and how much money you're making, you're stressed out because you've been doing so well, right? If you're used to being told how great you are, it's hard to accept you might have a bit of a blind spot. And I think that's what a lot of this is. It's all...
That's interesting, that,
is that I know I've left positions because actually my values and values of senior management, not necessarily direct, but kind of further up, just didn't match. And I think you have a choice of calling it out, and I have called things out, particularly around gender, and I didn't get the reaction I kind of wanted, or the acknowledgement, or the change. And it's at that point you kind of think, well, actually, this isn't the right environment for me. And I think you do have to, on some occasions, leave that environment, because you can change some people.
Yeah.
And you can challenge and you can have those open discussions. And sometimes it's that person isn't, or people are never going to change. And therefore, actually, that environment isn't good for you. And
your well-being.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when I've left certain roles, it's been for a promotion opportunity. For some reasons, it's been because actually it was that exact thing that actually I was, kind of in a safe space because I was white, but because I was a female, it wasn't right. And therefore, I kind of wanted to kind of move on from that. I think the idea of kind of being an ally and allyship is really great, and I think is one of the reasons I probably said yes to doing this session, is because the more people talk about things and have open discussions, I think it kind of helps unpack some of those challenges that sometimes people have.
I think the thing with allyship, I have a complicated relationship with that, because I remember from the perspective of a trans person, allyship was very cool a few years ago. And it's substantially less cool today. I do think there was sort of a trend towards, again, like sticking up for trans people, which I think we've seen reverse pretty abruptly in the last several years. It does make me wonder, like, allyship is incredibly important, right? It's really good when you have it, but I do think as a queer person, I can't let my sort of liberation rest on the hands of people that aren't involved in the community.
Yeah.
So we need more people to be allies, but like I'm now incredibly jaded, I suppose.
I think, yeah, there's
It's when it's not meaningful, I guess. It's that performative
Yeah.
allyship.
Yeah.
you have to really mean it and know what you're talking about as well, and do the work to
and keep doing
yeah.
the work, because things change and things
Yeah.
there are nuances, and it's not just like this is so clear cut. There's new policy, there's new
Absolutely.
causes.
We're seeing, in America specifically, some pretty apocalyptic stuff happening with trans rights over there. Like it's it's time to go. If you live in Texas or Florida, not everyone can, and that's incredibly rough. But if you can, it's time to go. It's time to get out. And the problem is, we're at that stage, and yet, people aren't talking about it. Like the actual voices to stand up. It's all people in the trans community being like, okay, well, we have to fight back now in whatever ways we can, get people out. But the performative allyship would have been really helpful over the last few months. Yeah.
Right now, please.
And it's certainly not there anymore. So I find, again, it's quite interesting to see where this is gonna go. We do need a bit more culture to swing our way.
Yeah, I think as well, it's important that you're speaking honestly about it as well. It could be tempting to try and like soften what you're saying for other people's feelings, but there just isn't space for that right now.
Yeah, we're desperate.
Yeah.
We're flatly desperate for help. And we need we do need people to be speaking up. I think one of the big problems is you need to know a little bit about this stuff, and it's so hard with, having a phone which it just outputs information, whether that information is correct or incorrect, as we were saying
talking
outside,
earlier, yeah.
like, it's
Are
very...
you talking about the algorithm and things like
the
that?
algorithm, that eldritch being, Lovecraftian entity that we call the algorithm. It really does, like, when you think about the algorithm as a thing, I do think it holds a lot of similarities to some sort of Cthulhu-esque being that provides you with psychic damage whenever you open your phone. I think it makes it very hard to be an ally sometimes, especially with trans issues, because it is hard to understand by nature of what it is, but like,
it matters.
listen to us. That's the thing.
I think
just please listen.
Yeah.
Listening is important. That idea of having intersectionality in spaces where we're talking about policy and things is very important. I think it's a really interesting conversation, but also quite a difficult one at the moment. But when, Claire, you were talking about wanting intersectionality in kind of spaces where people are on boards and things like that, it just shows the need for real allyship in those spaces.
And sometimes you have to step into an uncomfortable space, and I think, a lot of my friends were like, why are you doing a PhD? You've got a reasonable job, house mortgage, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, no, because actually I don't want to, it sounds really awful, doesn't it? I don't want to leave this world not having had a positive element to it. And, as a mother of two boys, I want to bring them up that they are much more accepting of everyone as an individual, more so than maybe generationally we are at the moment. And I think part of that is having those questions and those open discussions, and I guess exposure to just loads of amazing people for being amazing people. If
you can change your mind. You don't have to get it right first time. I feel like there's this huge pressure to be like, I need to be everything all at once and I can't make any mistake, but that's just not realistic. But people do the work.
So true.
It's just not. Like if you think about the person you were 5 years ago, there are things you would not agree with now, I think, of what that person was or believed, even if it's the most slight things like your favourite TV show, let alone kind of more social issues. I feel like it's not being scared to grow and to do that work yourself, even privately, and then kind of maybe in those other spaces. But I think there is a kind of huge fear of getting it wrong.
Yeah, the fear of getting it wrong. I think I noticed this sometimes. I remember taking some seminar groups, right? Teaching sort of the first year electronic students at the university a few things. And I think it's always been a thing where people have been scared to put their hand up and say the wrong thing. But my God, you notice it now, like more so than I remember when I was at undergrad. You ask these kids a question and they're terrified. You can see the fear in their eyes. It's like they're absolutely terrified to get anything wrong. Unfortunately, that is how you learn.
Yeah,
what to do,
like getting things
like-
wrong is how you learn.
Yeah.
That's the process.
It's the
Yeah.
personal growth.
It's personal growth. It's also, I think it's a bit of a shift maybe from school where you have to get things right in an exam or whatever. You come to uni and the point is that you're failing and then you're learning from that.
Yeah, I think
It's a
people are
lesson.
scared of what their peers are going to think of them. I think that's probably the main thing. It's a social pressure thing of looking silly in front of different people that, you know.
You know, we are at time, so I don't know if we want to ask if you guys have any advice that you'd give to a past version of yourself and at what stage that person would be in, you can decide. Normally I say 5 years, but you guys have been on such journeys. I don't want to put a limit on it. I don't know what you think.
Do you want to go fast? Or
I mean, you go for Elle.
Okay. So 5 years ago was about the time I started transitioning. I think I was incredibly scared of everything that I was about to experience. What I would say now, and what I say to, you know, trans people I know that are coming out, is the real life and the internet are completely different, right? You might see horrendous stuff being said online. You probably won't get that. Certainly if you live in a city, certainly in my position, like online is very separate, and you know, you're sort of faced, or at least I was faced with the options of like my mental health getting substantially worse, or just taking the plunge, and it was worth it, and it was okay, and you know, the difficulties are there, but you know, they're much better than the alternative, and it doesn't go away. Like, you know, that part of you will keep trying to come out. So I don't know, you got to accept yourself, I guess.
For me, it's probably more about actually taking a step and saying, okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to, you know, just stay where I am and just pootle on. And actually, I'm gonna do something different. And I do try and do that. Every year, I always try and it sounds really cliche, doesn't it, about challenging myself. So this year, I'm mentoring two recently graduated students from the BAME sector, because environmentalists who are BAME really struggle in terms of getting roles because of whatever reason. So one of them, I'm really excited, got a job this week. I'm so proud of them.
Something to celebrate.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one, I'm still kind of supporting in terms of their journey. But that's it, isn't it? I think it's, for me, that's part of the standing up and kind of doing things. So yeah, being an authentic self and whatever that is, I think is probably my bit to finish on.
That's lovely.
Those were both really like touching
Yeah.
pieces of advice. Thank you so much for sharing with us and joining us today. I hope you've had a nice conversation here in the studio. I think that's all from us.
I think that's all. I think that's all we have time for.
It is definitely all. I think I've seen the time ticking by. It definitely is.
Yeah, it's time to wrap it up.
But just enjoying talking, to be honest.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been lovely.
Thank you.